Good afternoon. My name is Debbie Pond, and I'm the Program Manager from the College of Medicine and a first-year USAC member. It is my honor to welcome you to the first in a series of wellness webinars presented by the Outreach and Engagement Subcommittee as part of the University Staff Advisory Committee. We thank you for joining us today. Our next session, entitled Is Health Coaching for Me?, is scheduled for Thursday, October 8th, which will be led by the University Your Plan for Health Wellness Coaches. Please check the USAC website under News and Events 2020-2021 USAC Wellness Series for details in the registration link. For the webinar format, attendees' cameras are turned off and microphones are muted. However, the Q&A feature is enabled. Questions may be asked anonymously if you prefer, and participants will have the ability to upvote if the question asked is one in which you would like to know more about as well. Our moderator will review incoming questions and share with the presenter during appropriate times throughout the webinar. Transcription services will be provided for every wellness seminar. Today's webinar format will be a 30 to 40-minute presentation followed by a question and answer session. Finally, a recording with the transcription will be provided to attendees following today's session, as well as posted on the USAC website for review. In partnership with the Employee Assistance Program, Parenting in the Time of COVID-19 focuses on helping parents to navigate this new home, work, and school culture through behavior management strategies and using available resources. Our workshop will be led by Jody Leister, a practicing clinical counselor for the last 13 years and is a member of the OSU Employee Assistance Program. Jody has a wealth of experience working with children and families, as well as a passion for organizational growth and management. Compassion, humor, and learning are foundations of her practice in the EAP and her personal life. Welcome, Jody.
Hi. Hi, everyone. How are you? I'm going to share my screen so you can see the presentation today. Thank you so much for having me. This is a really great opportunity. I feel very passionate about this subject. So I am at home, as many of you probably are also, and my kids are downstairs. I have 3 small children. I have a 6-year-old, a 3, almost 4-year-old, big boy, and a recently 1-year-old. So, disclaimer, if at any point they are loud or they interrupt us, sorry, but at the same time, I'm not sorry, because I think that it's time that we start talking about what this is really like. I have to say my personal experience has been kind of a roller coaster, and I will share that with you. And I'm hoping that you guys will feel comfortable with asking some questions and looking to me if I can answer any of those questions, or looking to each other for support. I used to say before COVID, before, I had my last baby a year ago, that I needed a village. I was constantly looking for a village. I can say that I found that, but in a very interesting way. And we'll talk a little bit more about it. Please feel free, like Debbie said, to use the chat and to ask any questions in the Q&A feature. I'm gonna do my best to get through all of the content to give you these little nuggets of information that you can really enjoy and use and find useful. So forgive me if I do move a little bit too quick if you ask a question, but I'll get to it at the end. So hopefully you'll get some actual resources at the end of this. So let's be real, okay? It's been 6 months. Today is 6 months to the day for me that I have been working from home, or that I have been remote working, or whichever you like to call it. And life has just totally changed. Things are completely different than what they were before. I have to admit that I have slept more. But I have put a lot less effort into my physical appearance and learned that a lot of meetings that I used to attend really could have been emails. And I have actually really loved the slower pace of things once I learned to accept that. And once I learned to realize that it wasn't just me having an issue adjusting to everything, that it was universal, and I started giving myself a little bit more compassion. So I will say that my house is always very, very loud. all of the time, but it is very alive and it's interestingly provocative, yet kind of calm. So I hope that you are coming to grips with the way that life is as a parent, as a worker, as a human in the world that we live in, knowing all of the new changes that are going to be coming in the next few months as well. So this is a very real topic, and we have been thrown into this roller coaster of emotions, and I certainly have hit that proverbial wall several times over the last 6 months. But here are some strategies that I rely on to kind of help me through personally and professionally. So the thing to remember is that quarantine is a strong word. Stay at home, lockdown. I always joke with people when I meet them for the first time in this setting virtually, because I do counseling every day, and how they depict what they're experiencing is very telling, whether they say, I'm staying at home or I'm on lockdown. And it's just interesting, and usually I can call attention to it, but it's very helpful, you know, to pick up on nuances in language like that. So the thing is that we love our kids, we love our jobs, most of us, but none of those things did we ever choose to do all of the time. And that's really how it feels, all of the time. I think about, you know, PC time or pre-COVID time, as I've started to call it, and everything was very fast-paced. Everything was very difficult. It was, you know, jumping from one activity to the other. There was travel time that you had to feed into everything. We were always going to be stressed at this time of year because it's the beginning of school, fall sports, heading into holidays, all of that. But now we've added this whole other level. And I feel like people almost forgot that this is normally a very difficult time to navigate for parents. And now we're compounding it so much more. And truthfully, today's Friday, so I don't typically work on Fridays. On Fridays, I only have 2 jobs. I have mom and I have teacher. But today I added on a little bit of counselor as well because I love this. So that's what life is like. Time is a vortex. And I say that and I mean it so genuinely because it's like Groundhog Day every day. It's interesting, but it's so monotonous and so similar, and it's hard to just deal with that. Do any of you feel that way? I'm sure you do. I can just imagine your heads just nodding, you know. Feel free to raise your hands if you do. It's very hard to navigate this, and we're constantly finding or looking for, rather, things to change. We want to have some level of hopeful optimism to be able to carry us through the next thing, but that only lasts so long. The thing that I want you to take from this is that your experience is real, your experience is valid, and if you are one of those people that is constantly putting on a happy face and denying yourself the real experience of the stress that you're under, I ask you now how that actually serves you as a person, as a parent, as a worker. Because I truthfully, over the last couple of weeks, I have stopped hiding this part of myself from people. And this is kind of the culmination. And I say that, and I mean, yesterday, for example, with my coworkers, we were having a meeting and I spied my children out my window, my 3-year-old especially, opening our minivan door and climbing in, but I saw his papa nowhere near. So I immediately opened that window and I said, "What are you doing?" And all of my coworkers just stopped. Like it was my mom voice, you know? And it was that quick, you know? It was fine. My husband came out. It was great. I went back to doing what I was doing. I had school this week with my child and I had to moderate a meeting, and it would just, they totally interfered with one another. And I, instead of being overly apologetic, I just explained what was happening, and I decided not to make it a problem. If somebody else wanted to make it a problem for them, which they didn't, then that was something that they could choose to give their attention and headspace to. But for me, this is my life now. And I've constantly, over the last 6 months, struggled with, how do I keep my work to-do list and my home to-do list separate? But my life doesn't exist that way anymore. And the more I keep fighting and trying to make it fit this round peg in a square hole, The only person that is getting overwhelmed by it is me and my children. So I'm hoping that you'll see that we can stop talking to people about gratitude, especially parents. I am incredibly grateful that I have my wonderful family to help me through this. I could not imagine what it would be like if I were isolated and alone. As an extrovert, it's already hard enough. But that doesn't mean that I chose to be a stay-at-home mom or somebody that works from home or a first grade and kindergarten teacher. I didn't choose any of those things. And the fact that I don't want to have those roles does not make me any less capable as a parent or a mom, or any less loving towards my children. It just makes me Jody, and that's all right. And I need to give myself self-compassion, as do you. So it's truth time when it comes to this. It is really, really hard to work from home and to parent at the same time. It is really difficult to talk to your kids about what's happening and what will happen when you don't know yourself. I think the hardest thing about this, truthfully for me, has been my 6-year-old, who's now getting into this higher level of understanding and reasoning. And he's already a very emotional, empathic boy. But him crying and saying to me things like, I just want something new, mommy. And saying things like, I don't want to go to bed because it's just the same day over and over again. I want something new, or I miss my friends and all of that. And I feel the same way, of course. It's been so hard, so hard. And to try to explain all of that, it's been overwhelming. Also, to know what the right thing to do about childcare and play dates and, going to parks and all kinds of things like that. Not every parent that we know has the option of working from home in full isolation. My siblings, who have children, they have to still go to work. They're essential in a different way, different than I am. I'm very lucky that I get to work from home. It's also a very weird time if you're growing your family, if you're pregnant or if you became a new parent. 2 of my closest friends both had baby girls on the same day in the middle of COVID. And they both approach the situation completely differently. One, we have both have pretty small circles, so I've been able to incorporate them into my small circle of safety when it comes to what we're doing and what's best for us, and it's good. And the other has such a wide support network and is so busy that it's not really a possibility. We have to remember that it's hard for everyone, and that as parents, it's a different dimension to the difficulty. It's not more hard, it's just a different dimension. It requires a different level of split attention, a different level of prioritizing, and a different level of planning. Parents with kids with special needs or exceptionalities experience this a lot. But we also don't want to discount how much it affects our tweens and teens and adolescents in general. I always joke that adolescence is so hard because you have all of the responsibilities of an adult, but none of the privileges. And when you're a tween, you're trying to build this independence and you're constantly with your parents all the time. What must that be like? And let's be real. I mean, your entire life is based on socialization at those ages, as it should be. So when it comes to working with your kids and talking with your kids, we really want to focus on being very honest but simple with them. Answer their questions. If you don't know the answer to their question, say that, and maybe do some research on appropriate websites that your child can understand. Recognize their feelings. The thing that I like to always remind people is that our brain interprets emotional threats the same way that it interprets physical threats, that fight, flight, or freeze. So when we have a difficult time with making sense of our emotions, as most children do, because they're just not that abstract thinkers, they're concrete, labeling your emotions and labeling them effectively can be very, very helpful. We want to be more open with keeping in touch with people in our lives. I personally have really stepped outside of my comfort zone with the idea of texting even my neighbors as moms to the kids around me, as well as planning like play dates and virtual play dates and things like that. As much as I'm an extrovert, I do have, my oldest is 6, and this is a new foray for me into this realm of mommy friends, daddy friends, parent friends. So I make sure that I label my feelings too for them. This might sound like the silliest thing, but my 6-year-old loves Minecraft and he loves playing video games, and he wants me to play with him. And it's been such a learning experience for him in that I explained to him, I don't know how to play video games. I never played video games when I was a kid. And I'm asking him to please be patient with me, asking him to teach me how to do something, and asking him not to get frustrated when I mess up, because I always do, or when I get motion sick because this 360 manipulation, it makes me feel old. But I try to help them to look forward. We try to plan little things that we can do, small little things, and incorporating school. We are trying to take a little field trip every other week to someplace new and doing someplace. I always make sure that when I do leave, like go to the grocery store, that I tell them children and adolescents right now are having a very difficult time with attachment because it's so enmeshed, because we have to be, that the time away can be much more stressful than it typically would. So in that sense, giving lots of extra hugs and extra I love yous, words of affirmation are extremely important right now. But we don't want to tell our kids that their fears and that their feelings are, you know, difficult or not okay. And I don't think any of you probably are, but we don't need to fix it either. Part of what we have to do as parents is to teach them how to deal with distress. So these are the 3 major goals of parenting. And I like to go over these with most of the people that I do any type of parent coaching with, because I strongly believe that a lot of parents have the wrong idea about what parenting is. And I think that somewhere along the line in history, I don't know, maybe it's like, I think it's probably more my generation than anything else, there was this shift where we started thinking about like our job as parents is to keep our children happy. And maybe I'm just mean mommy, but I am never one to really get caught up with that. I have a long background of interacting with kids. I'm the youngest in my family. I have a twin sister, but I, you know, even when I was in 5th grade, I was a kindergarten helper. I babysat from when I was like 11 years old on. I worked with kids with exceptionalities in high school and then again in college. And then that's how I started being a counselor, working towards being a counselor. And I started working with kids and adolescents predominantly. So when we think about this, I learned this, and I really do believe this to be true, that our job as parents is not to make them happy. It is to provide them with unconditional love and support through keeping them safe, preparing them to become productive adults, productive being the key word there, and teaching them right from wrong. So if you approach the situations with your children that is your role, it can be very helpful to deal with any guilt you have about, you know, following through with boundaries that you've set, applying consequences, or allowing natural consequences to happen. And we'll talk a little bit more about that specifically, because consequences are a very interesting thing. I'm going to use terms from what many would think of as positive parenting. And positive parenting in itself has gotten quite the bad rap. So just give me a little bit of a grain of salt when it comes to this, and I'll explain why. But the idea behind being a parent is really owning your role. I have actually said to my 6-year-old, when he says, "Stop being mean to me," I've said, "I'm sorry that you experience me as being mean. My job is not to make you happy. I need to make sure that you follow through with your responsibilities. And sometimes you might not like that." I had that conversation today when he was saying, "I want to stop." And hopefully he's doing math right now. But it was a power struggle I chose not to engage in. But I own my role. I'm assertive, but I'm not bossy. Nobody likes to be bossed around. I think that we forget to treat our children like people sometimes, and that, you know, they don't have to like everything. There's a huge difference between acceptance and agreement. They don't have to agree with us, but because of our role, they do have to accept what we're saying. They have to clean their room. Do I make my kid clean his room and be like Susie Sunshine about it? No, he can complain and be too rough with his shoes when he's throwing them in his closet. It's a results goal, and I'll talk more about that. He has to do it. The shaping of his behavior when it can be a little bit less distasteful and disdainful is something that I can focus on later. I'm trying to teach a skill right now. Think about it too, though, with regards to your children, as if they have these attention baskets. So they have baskets related to their positive self-worth, and they have tasks and baskets related to negative self-worth and their need for attention. Which one are you actively trying to fill? So most kids want attention. We crave it. That's part of attachment, and that we need that. So if they're not getting the positive attention that they're requesting, needing, yearning for, they will find ways of getting the negative attention. And I say this because I have seen it come alive multiple times a day in my life. When my oldest is having a behavior issue, without fail, if my middle child is saying, mommy, 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 and I don't pay attention to him, he'll immediately start doing exactly what the oldest is doing to get the attention. And then it becomes a symphony of screams, and mommy cries. Not really. Usually I just walk away. But they need attention. I've said this many times that if you find yourself constantly redirecting your teenager or your child to say, stop that, stop that, stop that, try a time in. Try stopping what you're doing just for 15 minutes and give them your undivided attention. You'd be actually really surprised how quickly they'll get filled up with it. Doesn't take much, and then they'll go do something else and give you back the time that you want. It's like, what is a power struggle? What do you want to choose to focus your attention on and what not to? You're giving your power to them when you're getting frustrated and angry. I joke around with people and my husband all the time, and I say, don't give them all the power. It's not a power struggle if you realize that you have it all. As a parent, you do have it all. That's why they're fighting you, because they're trying to steal it away. Think about that. Just think about it a little bit. So don't give your kids the satisfaction of overreacting. See what their behavior is trying to tell you. Keep in mind that this is not a one size fits all. So by no means am I good at this all the time. I'm a yeller. I'm going to be honest. I was raised with yellers. I hate that I yell. I'm doing much better at it. But sometimes I just get on sensory overload and I just explode because I'm human. And I've been with my children, truthfully, 24/7 for over a year because I had a baby and went on maternity leave and all that stuff. So I've had about 6 weeks without my children in the last 14 months. That's a long time, you guys. Okay, so positive parenting. Positive parenting means that you're taking an approach that's sensitive to your child's individual needs. It is not that you do not provide consequences or punishments. It is not that you accept unacceptable, disrespectful behavior. It is not that you are overly caring and, baby-ish. It is meeting the child where they're at and remembering that they're a child, but they still deserve respect, and that you can teach them things. You don't have to look at things from a perspective of expectations that have already not been met. And I say that very, very simply because we forget what it's like to be a little kid. Kids don't have experiential knowledge to draw from to do a lot of the things that we're doing right now. And at the same time, it's really hard as parents to see them in distress. So we want to do everything that we can to help them. And sometimes that makes us lawnmower parents. If you guys don't know anything about a lawnmower parent, I'm sure you've heard of helicopter parent, but a lawnmower parent and a helicopter parent are similar. Helicopter parents like hover. Did you do this? Did you do that? Oh, but check here. Oh, let's just make sure that it's okay. Oh, put your socks in the laundry hamper. Do you have your lunch? All of those things, just constant. Hover. A lawnmower parent mows every obstacle down. They don't even nag. They just do for them. And what ends up happening with the best of intentions is that our children and our teenagers don't have a certain level of resilience to know what it's like to deal with failure and to see it as an impermanent thing. So they don't build that sense of self associated with it, but then they also don't build critical thinking skills. And that is really where critical thinking skills start. Figuring out a problem, experiencing a problem, and having that emotional sensation to say, oh, this sucked so bad. I don't want this ever to happen again. What can I do to make sure that doesn't happen again? And that's how the learning process starts. So for us as parents, part of it is being able to let our kids feel distress to a reasonable level and to sit with it. So the 4 points of positive parenting success: redirecting them, being an effective parent. If your child is not following through with what you're asking them to, or they have a short attention span, just honor it. Push them a little bit when it comes to their attention span. Push them a little bit outside their comfort zone, but know when enough is enough, because you have to learn what their baseline is. So me, for example, my 6-year-old, he's in 1st grade. I genuinely don't know what his baseline is. He has some ADHD tendencies. I actually had him tested and evaluated by the school district because I wanted to see what were the limitations, if any, that he might have had. And he does have some, so that I could know where's an area that I can push and where's an area that I shouldn't. What do I need to be sensitive to, and how do I need to treat him with respect in that situation? And it's helped quite a bit. So today, when he was like, I don't want to do any more math, I'm done with school, and started being disrespectful, I looked at him and I said, I can tell that you need a break, and that's all right. Let's go take a break. And he started to argue and started saying, no, I'm done with school. I don't want to do math. And I walked away, and he followed me and he engaged in the break. And like I said, hopefully he's doing his math right now. So I redirected him. It's consistent. It's being able to do the same thing over and over again and have them expect that when I do A plus B, I'm going to get C, whether that's positive or negative. It's participating actively in their lives and actually asking them, what did you do today? What do you like? What would you like to do? And giving them choices. It's not giving them the things that they want, but it's being an active participant, even if it's providing discipline. And then when you're being attentive to them, you're showing them that you care, you're involving them in your life as well, and you're monitoring what they're doing, but you're fostering independence. So that's like sitting next to them, maybe parallel while they're watching too much YouTube, because let's just be honest, there's too much screen time right now, but whatever. So when you think about that, think about your behavior and how you relate to them. Without realizing it, you might find that you antagonize them or shame them or even hold a grudge. Saying things like, you act just like your brother. Why do you have to be so difficult all of the time? Maybe saying something like, I don't know, have you learned your lessons? See, I told you not to do that. Something like that, that's not helpful. Or maybe you just like, wait when your mom gets home. Oh, this happened. So my 6-year-old has been, and my 3-year-old have been tattling a lot lately. And this, you would think that they would grow out of this, but they don't, because case in point, my husband had a really rough day with my 6-year-old and my 3-year-old. I think it was Monday after I did school with them. And I got off of work and I walked downstairs because my office where we are right here is actually my closet. I converted it into an office. And I walked downstairs and immediately my husband looks at me and with a stern little face, and he looks at my Bishop, my 6-year-old, and he's like, tell her what you did. And I was like, what? And he's like, come on, Bishop, tell her what you did. And I said, pause. You're tattling. I looked at my husband. I said, you're tattling. That's not helpful. I'm not the bad cop. Don't make me the heavy, which probably I shouldn't have said in front of him. Let's be honest. But immediately my son felt very validated, and he didn't get snarky, but I saw the look on his face be like, and my husband was like, oh, okay. It was a learning experience for us all. I said that out of frustration and I probably should have waited, but my husband was doing it and he didn't even realize it. He was totally shaming him and holding this grudge from what had happened earlier and doing the exact thing that we had been telling him, our 6-year-old, not to do. And it was so interesting and ended up being just a great learning moment. But be mindful when you do this. When you say things like, Why can't you do it all the time? Thank you, but why can't you do it all the time? You're spoiling the response, and you're also shaming them a little bit. Like, you're doing enough now, but usually you don't. Don't do that. Try to catch yourself. Catch yourself when you do it to your spouse too. That's important. Rethink the way that you address consequences. So a good rule of thumb for me, and I do this, actively do this, if a consequence is not working and it doesn't stop the undesirable behavior or start the desirable behavior, that does not mean that you should come up with something worse or something better. We shouldn't punish more or bribe more. We should stop and think, maybe this is not something that a consequence is going to work for. Maybe that's not the right strategy. But if consequences are something that are useful to you and the situation merits it, that they really need to learn a lesson, and it's not a lesson that they're going to really get unless they have something that elicits some discomfort, that's when a consequence is really good. Like, you know that they need to feel uncomfortable. You know, it needs to hurt. Like the smallest little thing. So for example, my children are daredevils. It is like WWE at all times in my house. The 3 boys, whatever. But if they're climbing on something and I say, be careful, that'll hurt, and they don't listen to me the first time, I'll say, all right, that's gonna hurt when you fall. They fall, it hurts. That hurts a lot, huh? Yeah, okay. Making sure they feel better. What are we gonna do next time? Not climb on the thing. I let them fall within reason. The consequence needs to be respectful of the child and not shame. It needs to be related to the misbehavior that you're actually giving them. And it needs to be a reasonable duration of a punishment or consequence for the indiscretion that they had. We also need to make sure that we're revealing the consequence before we give it. So I always tell my kids, the first one's a freebie. The first time you do it, the first time you screw up, mommy's gonna try not to yell at you and try to manage. I'm gonna try my best. After that, I'm gonna explain to you what my expectation is, and then there will be the consequence. If they then choose to do that behavior again, whether it's because they forget or it's intentional, it's my responsibility to set the boundary and to enforce the consequence. Even if I don't want to, it's still my responsibility. I need to make sure that I've repeated that and gotten consensus that they know what the consequence is. But I kid you not, doing this even with my 3-year-old, truthfully, especially with my 3-year-old, because he's so concrete with the way that he thinks, he's so black and white, it makes a world of difference. Another thing that's really, really helpful is to use when then. So when then with kids is really simple. It's on the screen. When you do this positive behavior, then you will get this positive social reward. It's not like, and it doesn't have to always be a positive social reward, but we do this with dinner time. So dinner, you must eat your dinner. And when I say eat your dinner, they have to eat the vegetables and the protein. They don't have to eat the carbohydrates, but they have to eat the vegetables and the protein, and they know this. When you eat your dinner, then you will get dessert. We don't have power struggles about this anymore. There's a timer. Dinner starts, usually dinner's over by 6:30. If the timer goes off and you haven't finished your dinner, you are free to finish your dinner if you would like to, but you've lost your opportunity for dessert. We had lots and lots of power struggles when it came to this. And it was constantly just like, when you finish your dinner, then you can have your dessert. If that's not before the timer goes up, then I'm sorry, you missed your opportunity. They still to this day will mess up and not do that. But when we are identifying our expectation immediately, we're giving them a chance to choose to follow through, because then we're telling them that you will get what you want within reason. That's what they need to know. You are God to them as parents, or even as teenagers. I mean, you still hold all the power. Respect that you hold all of the power. Tell them what they need to do to get a little bit of it, because we all want a little bit of power. Otherwise, they're going to resort to some very unfavorable ways to try to get it too. So just keep that in mind. Be calm, be matter of fact. It's okay that they get mad at themselves for screwing up. You're just holding up a mirror, and that's a really hard lesson to learn. Remember what it was like for you when you learned it. So this is really helpful. Don't you all wish that you could just be this? You could just be this. Happy, put together, everything. No, usually it's more like this. Most people, it's more like this. And that's okay. It's business on the top, jammies on the bottom. And that's all right. Set reasonable goals for yourself. That's why I'm saying earlier when I was saying that I have stopped having separate to-do lists for work and for home. I need to incorporate these two compartments of my life because they are now enmeshed and I can't compartmentalize anymore. And the only person that it hurts is me. There are going to be blurred boundaries with work right now. There are going to be blurred boundaries across the board. That's all right. I had to remind myself this morning when my kids started school that I needed to take off my bathrobe because I didn't want his teacher to see me in my bathrobe. That was hard to remind me myself of that, but I did. I keep designated areas for work and for school and for homework and all of that, because your kids need to be able to mentally separate just like you need to be able to mentally separate. Give them breaks, use kitchen timers, do this for yourself and try to establish a routine. Be realistic about what the routine is. If you have been applying the paradigm that it takes me 2 hours to get A, B, and C done on PC time, pre-COVID time, it is going to take you twice, if not 3 times that in COVID time, because it's COVID, because we're stressed, because our concentration is off, because we have our attention pulled in a million different directions. But establish a routine that actually works for you. What your routine was before this, before 6 months have happened, may not work anymore, and just allow the flexibility for that. Because we all just need to relax when it comes to things like screen time rules, and when it comes to things like bedtime and diet and all of that. And this is a huge one. I use this all of the time for myself, but for other people. But I believe in the power of yet. Stop thinking that you have to put on a happy face for your kids and for people all of the time. Part of what your children need to learn right now is how to handle this lack of control and develop those critical thinking skills. They need to be able to push through adversity. They are watching you. The hardest part for me over the last 3 weeks with school starting was literally we had every problem you could ever imagine. My kid started school this week actually, and we did a total overhaul of everything. It was so hard to put on a resilient face, not a happy face, but a resilient face for my 6-year-old to say, okay, this is really uncomfortable. I know that I'm sorry we don't have our login still, but let's try and keep with our schedule. What do you want to do today? Science? Okay. You know, he picks archaeology that he wants to learn about. Sure. Let's go dig up stuff in our backyard. I don't know. That's what we did. And it was fly by the seat of our pants. And I was screaming and frustrated on the inside, but I tried to be calm and tried to tell him that I was frustrated and annoyed, but not to throw a tantrum. I did throw tantrums, just not in front of them. I mean, let's be real. So change your perspective. Be real. Think about the things and the negative things that you tell your kids or yourself or your kids tell themselves, and add a yet onto it. I'm never going to be able to do this, or I can't do this yet. I don't get to see my friends yet. I'm not going back to school yet. I don't get a full night's sleep yet. It undermines hope when we say things like, I can't, and it closes the door for progress. Putting yet on the end of things, you'd be surprised how much it mentally shifts for you. Stay in the know, you guys. These are some amazing resources that I actually came across because I was putting this together for you all, but then also in my late night, scrolling on the internet, asking lifelong parenting questions. there are so many resources. The World Health Organization, for example, they have come up with all different kinds of resources with regards to parenting in the time of COVID. UNICEF has a really great program in which they're providing internet service for people that typically wouldn't have access. There's a lot of concrete steps on how to navigate the school return process and just health in general. Positive Care for Children, the American Society for Positive Care for Children, gives a lot of free tips and little like webinars on how you can do some of these parenting techniques that I'm talking about. There's always, of course, there are parenting programs that you can purchase if you want. I personally have used parenting programs. I purchased Positive Parenting Solutions, and it's a really great program. I don't endorse it in any way. It just, for me, as a person that is a behavior specialist and being in a marriage, it was not a role that I could take on to be the person that taught my husband these skills and to coach him through this. And he was a person that really needed scripts, and he still needs like support outside of me. So it offered that opportunity because it wasn't going to be healthy for our relationship. So, but I also have learned so much, and it's so nice to have it. So there are lots of different things like that. Lots of free options. I'm going to send these to you all in an email following up. So don't feel like you have to write it down. There'll be hyperlinks for everything. And then here's a reading list for you. We're going to get to your questions and answers. I didn't stop because I wanted to make sure we have enough time. But this top book, The Gift of Failure. The Gift of Failure is a wonderful book. If any of you have any age children, I strongly recommend it. You can get it on Audible. It talks about helping children learn through failure, helping them to understand the concept of failing up, and helping us as parents to deal with our own distress of watching them struggle and really what it's teaching them. The Whole Brain Child is a great one as well. I really like that one. And this one is kind of funny because it's got a lot of anecdotes. The book I wish your parents had read, that's really good too. So I'm going to leave this up. I have other stuff that I can talk about. This is the training evaluation. Please feel free to leave me an evaluation, give me any feedback or pointers and things that you would like to know. But I'm going to open it up for questions. Debbie, do you want to go ahead and let me know if there are any questions? I can stop sharing my screen in a few minutes too.
Yeah, I have one question in the question and answer box.
Okay.
What are some tips for a restless 16-year-old whose friends are starting to have sleepovers?
Oh, so I'm guessing that you maybe, well, I'll take this question from two approaches. So the approach that you do want your kid to be able to do this, if you are okay with your child having, or your 16-year-old being able to go to sleepovers, then I would set some pretty basic ground rules for, you know, what your expectations are. That's the when then, you know, what are your expectations for their behavior while they're there? How do you, you know, in reinforcing that you're trusting them, and then being able to give them an opportunity to succeed. Honestly, if you give them this freebie and, you know, you do that and say, all right, this is a freebie, here are the things we have to do, maybe follow up with whatever checks and balances you establish and see if those were followed through. I'm hoping that you have a positive relationship with them so that you can trust that, or at least that you know when they're lying. There's a couple of really good YouTube videos about how to tell when somebody is lying too, by the way. Parents, check them out. But I say that, so if you are a person that doesn't feel comfortable with allowing your 16-year-old to go have sleepovers, you can, you know, talk about why you're concerned, talk about how you experience it. Your kids are not going to like hearing that maybe you don't trust them yet, but maybe they'll be open to learning ways that they can earn your trust. And I would challenge you as a parent to really examine what makes you uncomfortable and what makes you comfortable. Any of those things that make you comfortable are really great opportunities for you to provide positive reinforcement and feedback to your kids to say, you know, I think that you're ready to do this because A, B, and C, or I'm feeling worried and like, I'm not ready to have you do that because I need to see that you can do A, B, and C. And at least then they know what they're shooting for and what their goal is. So I hope that helps. I mean, if you want to add any more info, I'm happy to expand upon it.
Great. And Jody, we have a question that says, I'm worried about transitioning back to working on campus full time.
Yes.
Any tips for moving back to that greater separation / faster pace whenever that may happen?
Yeah, so I think it depends on for you as a parent, you know, what the age of your kids is. In the very beginning, you know, I talked about, you know, telling your kids before you leave. So preparing them, hopefully you're going to have some information about when that's actually going to happen. I know that I experienced this even with my 3-year-old. He's like Velcro, and it's going to be a transition. It's going to be really hard. He has a hard time when I come upstairs to go to work. So you can do like emotionally preparing yourselves for that, making sure that maybe you can check in if you have time to call, or if you have time to, you know, video chat. Then also logistically, giving yourself a little bit extra time to be able to prepare. So, you know, for safety procedures, having some, like a designated space in your garage for being able to take clothes on and off and all of that. I mean, that's something that you should probably prepare your children for too, and start that routine with now too, if your kids are going to be going back to school also. And the faster pace. So I believe very strongly that it is our job as parents to be very genuine with our kids, but also with our employers, and to say, just because I'm back into the workforce doesn't mean that my life is back to normal. And to really start forecasting and having conversations about what reasonable expectations are. And the thing is that it's hard because your employer has their own expectations, but you are allowed to have your own as well. And you can communicate those to say what your capabilities are and what your flexible places are. So it's like there's negotiables and there's non-negotiables. And it's the same thing when it comes to your kids. So masks, for example, masks are non-negotiables. They're at school, they're non-negotiables. My kids know that whenever we go anywhere, it's a non-negotiable. We went to Aldi a few weeks ago, and they know this. Within 2 minutes of walking in the store, my 6-year-old had his mask down, not over his nose. I warned him once. That was his one time. I gave him a chance. If you can't keep your mask on, we're going to leave. Seconds later, he pulled it down again, picked him up and took him home. Did it add lots of time to me? Absolutely. Into my day? Absolutely. But having constant conversations and being on the same page with like what the flexibility in the schedule is going to be with your employers, with your spouse, with your kids. Treat your kids like humans. Talk to them about it. They're going to miss you. They're going to miss you. And it's going to be heartbreaking, truthfully. Or maybe it'll be like the best thing in the world. So anyway.
Next question is, someone who always worked to separate work from home, how do I manage the struggle I have now with everything being in one place?
As someone who used to have things separate?
Yeah.
Okay.
You always work to separate work from home life. How do you manage the struggle now that everything is in one place?
So it's interesting because, so for me personally, I needed an actual like physical separation space wise. So I originally, I had I have an absurdly large closet. It's just weird. And it even has a window. I don't know who designed my house, but I'm glad not for it now. So anyway, I needed a physical separation. So I had like a partition that I put up in front of my clothes, and like I put a, you know, I think $30 Amazon desk in my office when I first started. And my understanding and realization that this was going to extend and be longer than I really had ever anticipated, I realized that I needed to designate actual space for my own separation so that I could mentally and physically separate when I had to work. If that's possible for you, do that. And when I say that, I don't mean even like having a separate room. I mean like buying a screen separation, or you guys can see, I'll show you, maybe you can see me. So if you can see over here behind all that, those are curtains. What I did is I went to IKEA, well online, And I bought the track for like the hospital curtains, and I bought some curtains off of Amazon. I'm not joking, it was $25, but I made like this little, to like give myself a little cocoon. Do it if you need to, in whatever area you want. It's not expensive. But when you have those to-do lists, you know, work and home, is it actually possible for you to expect yourself to shut your brain off completely from home? Do you have a caregiver that's able to say you are inaccessible during that time? If you do, awesome, fantastic. I think physically keeping the space separation and then also keeping an actual schedule and being done at 6 o'clock is really important. Those are the main things you can do, but it's not possible completely. Not yet with the way our world is. Our world hasn't caught up with what parents actually need when it comes to their expectations. I think we're still expected to function the same way that we always did. It's slowly changing.
Do you have any tips for grandparents raising grandchildren or resources specific to that?
I can't think of any resources specific to it, but I do have a lot of help from my parents as grandparents. Like on Tuesdays, my oldest does school with my mother, and the biggest challenges that we've had have actually not been behavioral or anything like that. It's been more with my mom's confidence with navigating the technology and things like that. So I personally have been doing a lot more high touch when it comes to that and really managing my own patience, but also trying to encourage the same types of problem solving skills with them that I do with my kids and that I do with myself. I mean, my mom's been retired for a long time. She never had to do any of the things like this. And it is so wonderful and kind that she's offering to do that. Does it add some stress to me? Yes, but I'm thankful for it. I think that helping the kids to understand that like the pace is different. Grandparents might not be able to keep up with the same way, but also like getting them to understand that like their grandparents can teach them and show them things that like they never would have had the opportunity to get to know and do too. So I don't know. Hopefully that helps.
What are some good steps to take to ensure one parent doesn't become the bad cop?
Oh, that's a good question. It's interesting. So it depends on that's a hard question because it depends on the dynamic that you have between you and your spouse, but it also, I think, depends on the temperament of your spouse. So talking about it is really, really important. If you find that you're the person in the relationship that tends to be the heavy, I would say approach it from a curious perspective, not a judgmental one with your significant other. So I gave that example of myself. You know, I tend to be the heavy, but I also, as much as I'm the heavy, it's not because I'm like a bad cop. It's because I'm the one that's the most stalwart about the rules, and I'm the one that follows through with the boundaries the most. I also am the one that tends to give the most praise, and I'm very, very affectionate. My husband, he's great, but he's not a therapist. I'm a therapist. I label all my feelings. I do all that stuff. So like I said before, I got some parenting programs because I didn't want to put myself in the role, even with him, that I was the bad cop. You know what I mean? Like that I'm the one that's making all the rules or managing the household. I think that you can pick some specific issues to start flexing that muscle if one of the people in your partnership is a little bit more passive or struggles more with holding the line. Pick something specific and then be available for them to process afterwards. But you need to keep growing it. You know, they have to keep stepping outside of their comfort zone.
Great. First of all, I don't have a question, but I have a comment that I think is good. It says, I feel like I'm on maternity leave again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I feel like I never ended maternity leave. But it's weird because if you feel like you're on maternity leave, does that mean that you're not trying to do your job at the same time, or were you doing your job on maternity leave when you shouldn't have been? Think about that.
Good point. And then someone asked if you could post the survey link in the chat, or maybe when you send the
Yeah.
email out tomorrow
Yes.
or later today with the resources, could you put that link in there?
Yes, absolutely. I absolutely can. So are there any more questions, Debbie? Because I want to just tell you a little bit about the last couple things that we're offering in the EAP.
That's all of them.
Okay, well, feel free to keep asking if you have any, but I do want to tell you guys a little bit about some of the upcoming workshops that we have beyond this. So in October, we're doing Working with Multi-Generational Workplace, which is really a great topic, and we have some outside presenters that are coming. And then we also are doing something with Buckeye Wellness about compassion fatigue and compassion satisfaction. And then figuring out the art of caregiving. So like giving at work and at home. And it's about how to really find personal fulfillment in what you're doing beyond like the expectations of others, but like for you, how to have that feeling of self-efficacy and how you're judging it and how you're really trying to grow it, because we're struggling with tangible things in life right now, I think. We're also doing our mental health awareness workshop. So that is available. We have some public offerings that you can look up through Link to Health. And then we also offer them for groups of 5 or more, between 5 and 30. If you want an individual offering for your group or your team, we can do that too. And then if you like the conversation and being able to just talk and focus on something specifically with peers, kind of guided, similar to like a really open group counseling session, we have the Buckeye Breaks that are moderated by Helka Casey. She is our newest member of the EAP, but she is a very seasoned clinician and a close friend of mine. And she's got a great personality. So check those out on Fridays also, and you can find them in Link to Health. They're open to anybody who's interested. So it looks like we have one more question.
Yeah.
Any tips for carving out time? Okay, for parents and work for self-care. Parenting. Okay, so yes. I would say like truthfully having a really real conversation with your significant other, but planning for this and scheduling it and following through with that schedule. I am a person, as a coping skill, I have to be able to do things. I'm a doer. If any of you have ever done Strength Finders, I'm an activator through and through. I need tangible ways of marking time, of feeling as if I'm accomplishing something, of feeling useful. I have a lot of issues, not issues, but I have a lot of self-beliefs about the idea of usefulness. And in knowing that about myself, I need projects. I have done so many projects. My husband knows this about me. He gives me one weekend, like one day a weekend. So we have 3-day weekends typically. He'll give me at least half of the day where I can work on some project that I want of my own. And like last week, it was cleaning out a garage. The week before that, I was really stressed about all the school stuff. And so I destroyed the weed garden that was my front planters. So he knows that that's something that I need, and I'm very straightforward about it. It is my responsibility to tell him what I need and to do that. So keep that in mind, that you can't expect your significant others and the people in your life to know when you need those things and to just read your mind. Part of the challenge is that we don't even realize what our expectations are half the time until we're already disappointed. So try to preempt that. Self-care is important, whether that's, like every Thursday night for 2 hours is your night to yourself, or, maybe a Zoom meeting, or maybe you go for a walk. But then also, one of the things that you can do is prioritize time with one of your kids or with your significant other. So like in my household, Tuesday nights is date nights with my 3-year-old, Wednesday night is date night for mommy and daddy, and then Thursday night is a date night with a 6-year-old. So really what that means is that my kids like to sleep in my big bed or fall asleep, and I get to go to bed really early, and I love that. So, and then usually we get to like go for a night walk or something like that. But Nobody's going to make time for it. You have to.
Yes. Real quick, there was a question in the chat about,
Sure.
we know it was being recorded, but will it be sent out, and is it okay for people to share that with others? So
Yeah.
that's perfect. Yes, absolutely. And the link will be on the USAC website after this to view the recording.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's 1 o'clock exactly. I don't think I've ever timed something so well. That is weird because I'm late for everything. But thank you so much, you all. Thank you for coming and for asking questions and doing a good job. You are all doing a good job and the best you can. So take care of yourselves.
Thanks so much, Jody.
You're welcome.